Part 4. Fringe Artists in the Entertainment Industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 31. Chapter 31. The Romance of the Crew, please follow up. At night, Chen Lian was lying on the bed in a quiet room, with a cigarette hanging from his mouth. In the dark room, only the cigarette butt flickered. He is still thinking about the role of Mid-Autumn Festival. It is difficult to find a prototype to experience the Republic of China drama in the old era, but as a human being, many things are the same. Human emotions are the same. As long as Chen Lian captures the emotions of the Mid-Autumn Festival characters, he will naturally perform well. However, the role of Mid-Autumn Festival is a little more complicated. Love alone is not enough. The temptation and struggle brought about by ethical taboos and class differences are equally important. But all this will be solved when Gong Li comes. Gong Li possesses these 2 points. One is a new young actor, one is an international movie queen, one is a younger brother in his early 20s, and the other is a mature and intellectual older sister. The large status gap is quite consistent with the characters in the movie. I still admire Gong Li and Chen Lian very much. She was able to win the Best Actress in her first movie and almost never returned empty-handed from the movies she participated in. Such actors are really rare. The most important thing is that all the awards they get are grand prizes. Many actors work hard all their lives and never get a single award, but they get it easily. After the script was basically formed, Chen Lian began to slowly take on the role. As for what requirements director Chen would have later, it didn't matter. Anyway, the general direction would not change, and it was not difficult to make temporary adjustments to some details of the performance. Sometimes Chen Lian doesn't like the habits he has gained from acting in dramas for so many years. As long as he enters the character state, he must be emotionally coherent. Even though the movie is shot scene by scene, after Chen Lian enters the scene, he must maintain the continuity of the character whether in front of the camera or behind the camera. It's hard to be like other actors who jump into the scene when the director calls out and leave when the director calls. But this is also the reason why Chen Lian is better at acting than others. Frequent in and out of scenes will only make the performance stay on the surface, making it difficult to really penetrate into the heart of the character. After thinking for a while, Chen Lian threw the cigarette butt into the ashtray filled with water and prepared to go to bed. Dong dong dong. There was a sudden knock on the door in the room. Chen Lian sat up in the darkness, turned on the light, walked behind the door and asked, "Who is it?" The person outside the door didn't answer, and Chen Lian didn't intend to continue asking. He opened the door directly. He could guess who was outside the door. In the dimly lit corridor, Mr. Zhou stood outside the door wearing a large white t-shirt. His hair was wet, and the few strands of hair in front of his forehead were sticking to his cheeks and dripping with water. Chen Lian looked at Mr. Zhou's 2 slender straight legs under his loose t-shirt, then turned sideways to make room for her to come in. This kind of dressing is a bit too sexy, and it is not safe to stand in the corridor in the middle of the night. Mr. Zhou's face was red with a hint of shyness, but his big eyes were filled with flamboyant stubbornness, and he looked at Chen Lian with some unwillingness to admit defeat. Perhaps it was Chen Lian's confidence and the embarrassment of having his secrets revealed when the two separated before, that made Mr. Zhou unable to sleep after returning to his room. Chen Lian's face always comes to mind, sometimes flamboyant, sometimes gloomy, sometimes pure and childlike. Chen Lian feels like a mystery to Mr. Zhou, a contradictory polyhedron that always brings her different feelings. People can't help but be curious and want to know more about this man. In such a sleepless mood, Mr. Zhou suddenly realized that Chen Lian's confidence was right, and he seemed to really like him. When he said that he almost fell in love with her, his heart almost stopped. When he deliberately provoked him, it was not a self-expression. It's just that Chen Lian has controlled it and is wandering on the edge of love and non-love, but Mr. Zhou can't control his emotions, so he has the courage to knock on Chen Lian's door to declare his failure. Chen Lian stood shirtless opposite Mr. Zhou, with the dim moonlight shining on his muscular body, making him look like the Moon Knight and the elf conqueror in fairy tales. Mr. Zhou wanted to reach out and touch Chen Lian, but Chen Lian reached out and grabbed his wrist. Chen Lian's backlit face showed no emotion, only a slightly teasing voice sounded, "What do you want to do here?" "I'm here to admit defeat." Mr. Zhou suddenly hugged Chen Lian and said, putting his delicate nose against Chen Lian's chest and blowing out his hot breath. Mr. Zhou's thin body was trembling slightly, his legs were stretched straight, and he looked like a wounded beast. He was lovable, but he couldn't help but want to bully him. Chen Lian looked down at Mr. Zhou's white and rosy skin, which exuded a hazy beauty even in the darkness. After a long time, Chen Lian's slightly majestic voice sounded in the darkness, "Do you know the consequences of admitting defeat?" Mr. Zhou did not answer Chen Lian's question, but looked at him with a slightly heavy breath, with submission and flattery in his eyes. When Chen Lian opened his eyes the next day, he was the only one in the room. If it weren't for the lingering smell and messy sheets in the room, he would have doubted whether he had dreamed yesterday. Chen Lian got up from the bed and stretched his muscles. He felt that his body, which had not exercised much in the past month, had regained its vitality. Proper exercise is good for your health. After getting up, Chen Lian had nothing to do. The crew had been shut down and he could only sit idle until the new heroine arrived. The matter of changing the heroine did not go so smoothly. After Su Fen knew that director Chen was going to change, he immediately came to the set from Xiangjiang and talked with director Cheng for several days, but finally compromised. Wang Jingying still left the crew with humiliation and regret. Chen Lian expressed sympathy for this and stood in front of his window to watch her leave. Mr. Zhou stuck his head out from behind Chen Lian, his hands still on Chen Lian's waist, not honest at all. Chen Lian retracted his gaze from the window, glanced down at Mr. Zhou's little hands and said, "Have you become a bit more discerning lately? When the computer is turned on again, there will be no chance," Mr. Zhou said against Chen Lian's back. Chen Lian replied softly, "It won't be so fast. The producer's compromise and the heroine's departure does not mean that a substitute will be replaced immediately, not to mention that Gong Li is not a substitute. Director Cheng personally called Gong Li several times and invited him several times before he succeeded. After the crew was shut down for 2 weeks, Gong Li finally got a schedule and rushed from the capital to Tongli Water Village. With the arrival of Gong Li, the haze of the entire crew seemed to be cleared away. No one would think that Gong Li's performance was not good. It seemed that the crew's biggest problem had disappeared and the movie could finally start smoothly. Chen Lian was also very excited. He could finally start acting after being idle for so long. The night Gong Li arrived on the set, director Cheng couldn't wait to start a script reading to help Gong Li find her groove quickly. It's just that during the roundup reading, there were a few scenes that were slightly larger in scale, and Gong Li had some different opinions. The strong scene between Ling Long and Zhang Kaiu felt very abrupt. She has a good impression of Zhang Kaiu and has feelings for Zhang Kaiu. The contrast between Zhang Kaiu and Zhang Kaiu is too big. Gong Li didn't quite understand the arrangement. Ling Long was unwilling to have a relationship with Zhang Kaiu again, but in the end she was raped by Zhang Kaiu, who was blinded by desire. It's not that I don't want to do large-scale scenes. Anyway, I don't have a boyfriend, and it's not a nude scene, so there's nothing to avoid. I just felt that the scene was too strange, and the changes between the two characters before and after were a bit intense." Chen Lian remained silent after hearing this. He had nothing to say about the intimate scene, it was just for the sake of the plot. Moreover, Gong Li had just divorced and was single, so he had no psychological burden, and he, a man, did not suffer. He just felt that the scene was too blunt and the characters' actions lacked sufficient internal causes. Mid-Autumn Festival, why are you using force on Ling Long when you are so cute? There are so many promiscuous women with handkerchiefs out there, go find them. I posted it twice before and it was against the rules. I couldn't control my fault. It has been modified and the update has been delayed. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu Xiaomao. Chapter 32. Chapter 32. I, Chen Lian, never take the initiative. For an actor, the best performance is no performance. Chen Lian's current state is that he can't perform. After more than a month of slowly adjusting, walking around the Pang family mansion every day, it seems that he has resonated with the house through time and space. Resonating with the non-existent Mid-Autumn Festival, he became a servant in the Pang family's mansion, a servant who loved the eldest lady wholeheartedly. This is the place he longs for. He has grown up in this house since he was a child. His biggest ambition is to become a senior servant of this house one day and stay with the eldest lady Linglong every day. There is also an abbreviation for a senior servant, that is, a butler. But now not only is the dream coming true, it's super doubled. He has directly achieved a class leap, promoted from servant to master, and is about to become the god brother of the eldest lady Linglong. This news made Zongkaiu excited, panicked, and even suspected that he was dreaming. But when he actually stood outside the door of the Pang family ancestral hall, he was shocked to realize that this seemed to be true. The master is dead, the eldest master smokes and becomes a disabled person, unable to speak or turn his eyes, and the Pang family has no one in charge. The only person qualified to succeed as the head of the Pang family was the eldest lady Linglong. When she learned the news in Mid-Autumn Festival, she was happy for Linglong from the bottom of her heart. Have a good death, master. There was a dense crowd of clan members standing outside the ancestral hall, all waiting for the clan elders to announce who would be the next head of the family. Everyone guessed that the head of the family would definitely be Linglong, but Linglong was a woman and someone must adopt her. As a member of the side tribe, who wouldn't want to become the master of the Pang family? Wearing a servant's blouse in Mid-Autumn Festival, looking at the tribesmen with different expressions, a sense of superior contempt suddenly arose in his heart. Only he knows that he will be the lucky one. But this condescending contempt was instantly brought back to its original state when the housekeeper shouted the name Linglong. Zongkaiu is not a master, he is just a servant of Linglong, a servant who is willing to wait for her all her life. Linglong wore a white morning dress and crossed the high threshold of the ancestral hall with brisk steps, not caring about the strange looks around her. I also didn't notice Mid-Autumn Festival hiding behind the crowd, and I didn't notice the excitement, fanaticism, and anxiety of Mid-Autumn Festival. At this moment of Mid-Autumn Festival, I only have one thought: hurry. Hurry up and announce that Linglong has become the head of the family, and announce that he will adopt the big house and become Linglong's god brother. After the elders in the ancestral hall announced that Linglong had become the head of the family, they shouted, "Linglong is a woman after all, and she still needs to find a capable helper to help support the family," so the clan elders discussed adopting a man to the big house. This person is Zongkaiu. After Zongkaiu heard the clan elder calling his name, his head exploded with a bang. He couldn't hear any of the noisy discussions around him or the clan elder's instructions. Looking at the high door of the ancestral hall, he looked through the crowd to Linglong in the middle of the ancestral hall. "Mid-Autumn Festival, hurry up, I'm calling you." A man dressed like a servant in Zongkaiu throws a long gown to Zongkaiu. This is a symbol of status and change, and it is also an insurmountable class and rule in this house. Zongkaiu subconsciously took over the robe, keeping his eyes fixed on the exquisite sound and shadow in the ancestral hall. He instinctively unfolded the robe, put it on and walked into the ancestral hall. Looking at the figure getting closer and closer, Zhongqiu suddenly panicked when he realized that he was about to become the man standing next to Linglong. He began to be afraid and began to wonder whether all this was real, whether it was a dream or whether it really happened. Zongkaiu hurriedly buttoned up his robe, looked at the main hall of the ancestral hall just around the corner, and subconsciously raised his legs to step in from the main entrance. But Pangan, the butler next to him, stretched out his hand to stop him and asked him to enter through the side door. Adopted children are not qualified to enter the main entrance. Such rules and discrimination make Zhongkaiu awakened. All this seems to be true. Mid-Autumn Festival walked into the ancestral hall from the side door, looked at Linglong so close at hand, looked at her aloof and calm expression, and instantly felt a huge inferiority complex in her heart. Zhongkaiu lowered his head and did not dare to look at Linglong again, suppressing all the emotions in his heart. Kowtow to miss, kneel down quickly and kowtow to miss, Butler Peng An's voice rang in his ears. Plop. Zhongkaiu knelt directly in front of Linglong without any hesitation. The clan elder at the gate of the ancestral hall said loudly, "Be younger during the Mid-Autumn Festival, and Linglong will be my sister from now on." Zhongkaiu, who was kneeling on the ground, raised his body tremblingly, raised his head and looked at Linglong, who was wearing white mourning clothes in front of him, and shouted softly, "Sister." The warm sunshine shines on Linglong's white clothes, forming a hazy halo. Looking up at Mid-Autumn Festival, Linglong looks like a fairy at this moment, so noble and holy. When she called her sister, Zhongkaiu finally put aside all her doubts and thoughts, and only her sister was in her eyes and heart. In front of the cruise monitor, Leslie Chung looked at Chen Lian in the camera, feeling a little shocked. The young man's secret love and inferiority complex, as well as his cautious eyes, were brought to life by Chen Lian. This is clearly Zhongkaiu himself. Director Cheng also laughed very happily. This was the most satisfying scene he had shot since filming started. Enjoyable. Moving clouds and flowing water. This is what you call an actor. If he hadn't been concerned about his image as a cultural man and artist, Director Cheng would have wanted to stand up and shout, "Good. That's so damn good." Chen Lian, who was kneeling in front of Gong Li, relaxed slightly and took a breath when he knew that the scene was finished. Director Cheng actually used a whole long lens to shoot the scene just now. If Chen Lian hadn't had rich experience in drama performances and was deeply involved in the drama, he probably wouldn't have been able to do it again. Gong Li didn't expect that Chen Lian could act so well. The word sister she just said almost made her heart tremble. She was in a daze before she came back to her senses. She bent down and reached out to hold Chen Lian's arm, and said softly, "Get up, don't kneel down." Chen Lian was helped up by Gong Li, looking a little confused as to whether the person in front of him was Linglong or Gong Li. It wasn't until Mr. Zhou ran through the crowd and ran in front of him that Chen Lian was able to break away from the state of Zhongkaiu and distinguish reality from illusion. "Chen Lian, your acting is so good. Why didn't you act seriously before?" Mr. Zhou was as excited as a child. Chen Lian glanced at her, and then said to Gong Li, "Thank you, Sister Gong Li." Gong Li showed off her gentle and mature temperament with a smile, completely outshining the young and lovely Mr. Zhou next to her. "It hurt a lot when I knelt down just now. I even heard a thud," Gong Li said with a smile. Chen Lian glanced at the excited Mr. Zhou, then at the charming Gong Li, and sighed inwardly. It's better to be a sister. A sister can care for others. She will help herself up after filming, and she will also care about whether her knees hurt. She is much better than a little girl named Zhou Gongzi. The neglected Mr. Zhou looked at the way Chen Lian looked at Gong Li and couldn't help but feel panicked. He quickly took Chen Lian's hand and said with concern, "Does it hurt? I'll rub it for you." "It doesn't hurt. There is a cushion. How can I be so delicate?" "Sister Gong Li is just joking," Chen Lian said with a slight smile. Gong Li looked at Mr. Zhou and Chen Lian and smiled slightly, then turned and headed towards Director Cheng. After Gong Li left, Mr. Zhou took Chen Lian's arm and said to him like a warning but also an uneasy pleading, "Don't take advantage of her." Chen Lian was stunned for a moment, then rubbed Mr. Zhou's little head and said, "Who do you think I am? Bad guy?" Master Zhou bared his teeth and shouted in a low voice. "You know, I never take the initiative, don't think so much." Chen Lian pinched Mr. Zhou's swollen cheeks and said. Mr. Joe glanced at Gong Li, who looked over from a distance from time to time, and whispered in his heart, "You don't take the initiative, but you will let others take the initiative." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu Xiaomao. Chapter 33. Chapter 33. There is no serious thing, please read more. At night, mist begins to appear in Tongli Watertown. There is always a lot of fog in autumn in the south. However, the mist-filled ancient town will give people a feeling of misty Jiangnan, like the sentimental Jiangnan in those gorgeous ancient poems. Chen Lian stood by the window of the room, looking at the scenery outside. Zhang Quarong leaned to the side with a glass of red wine in his hand, and asked with some gossip, "Are you and Mr. Zhou dating? You came to me for a drink in the middle of the night just because you wanted to gossip? Only older people can be so boring." Chen Lian was speechless. There is a slight gap between Leslie Cheung in the movie and Leslie Cheung in reality. Zhang Quarong has long been accustomed to Chen Lian's venomous tongue and said nonchalantly, "If you don't say it, you are admitting it. I have seen her come out of your room several times." Living opposite Chen Lian, Zhang Quarong bumped into Mr. Zhou several times and ran out of Chen Lian's room in a panic. Chen Lian shook the red wine in his hand, drank it all in one gulp, and then said, "There is no love, just friends, do you understand?" Zhang Quarong curled his lips, looked at Chen Lian with disgust and said, "You are such a scumbag, you are playing with other people's feelings." "No, I never play with feelings, I just..." Chen Lian shut up mid-sentence. What is there to talk about with a grown man? Moreover, Zhang Quarong's view of emotions was so different from his own that he didn't even understand it. After the two were silent for a while, Leslie Cheung swung his wine glass and said curiously, "Why didn't you act seriously when Wang Jingying was here before?" "I'm afraid that she won't be able to take on the role," Chen Lian said, and then explained, "and I know that she will definitely be replaced, so there is no need to be so involved." "So you waited until Gong Li came before you took it seriously, but your acting skills really shocked me." Zhang Quarong recalled the scene during the day, and still felt a little shocked. Every move and every look in Chen Lian's performance was so well executed that it didn't even look like he was acting. It was very real, natural, and extremely relaxed. "Thank you for your compliment. I'm done with the gossip, and I've received the praise. Can you go back to sleep now?" Chen Lian looked at Leslie Cheung and gave the eviction order. Leslie Cheung glanced at the upper watch on his wrist and said dissatisfiedly, "I've only been here for 10 minutes and you're driving me away. I haven't finished my wine yet. Master Jojo is coming soon, are you sure you don't want to leave?" Chen Lian raised his eyebrows and said. Leslie Cheung said narrowly, "Ha, then I won't leave. Up to you." 10 minutes later, Leslie Cheung returned to his room empty-handed, looking a little angry and talking to himself angrily. Chen Lian is shameless. Even if he chased him away, he even took away all the wine. Mr. Zhou, who was drunk that night, felt that she had a very strange dream. She seemed to be tied up and manipulated like a doll. When Chen Lian woke up the next day, he rubbed his temples with some confusion and glanced at Mr. Zhou, who was still sleeping soundly. "I vowed not to drink so much red wine in the future, the stamina is too great." After a while, Mr. Zhou was awakened by the sound of water in the bathroom. The vague memories in his mind instantly penetrated Mr. Zhou's shame. She was upset about what kind of madness she had suffered yesterday, but as her memory became clearer and clearer, her heartbeat became faster and faster. The dry mouth caused by the hangover made her swallow her saliva. Listening to the sound of water rushing in the bathroom, she got up and walked towards the bathroom. After a while, Mr. Zhou's inaudible voice came from the bathroom. Mr. Zhou did not come to the set with the crew that day. Director Chen was a little puzzled that Mr. Zhou, who usually followed him to the set to study, was absent. Facing director Cheng's doubts, Chen Lian replied calmly. She said she was feeling a little unwell and was resting in the hotel for the day. Director Cheng didn't know what he was thinking of. He nodded and said nonchalantly, "Okay, you can prepare and start shooting right away." "Okay," Chen Lian replied calmly. Chen Lian doesn't have many scenes today. Although the role of Zhong Qiu is the second male lead, due to character setting issues, he doesn't have many lines and doesn't have many scenes. It's far from comparable to Leslie Chung, the leading male lead. In Linglong's boudoir, Zhang Qiu timidly sat opposite Linglong with a cup of tea, not daring to look directly into her eyes. Looking at Zhang Qiu's timid look, Linglong said warmly, "Did your family get you engaged?" "No," Zhang Qiu replied softly. Linglong's eyes were dull, and she smiled softly and said, "When I was alive, I was engaged to be engaged, but I was not wanted." The afternoon sun shines through the window and casts dappled light on Linglong's face, which seems to be glowing hazily. She holds her delicate hands and looks at the Mid-Autumn Festival and whispers, "Because I smell smoke." Zhang Qiu felt a tightness in her chest, recalling the first time she met Linglong when she was a child. That time, Linglong, who was still a child, smelled the smoke and became so excited that she made a mess at home and ran into the ancestral hall. The master scolded her and accused her of being a woman and not allowed to enter the ancestral hall. Finally, Zhang Qiu caught Linglong running around, hugged her and left the ancestral hall. Linglong seemed to think of her childhood memories and felt that the world was really wonderful. Two people who could not enter the ancestral hall were now the owners of this house. Just as the two of them were immersed in their memories, the housekeeper Pang came in and said to Linglong in a contemptuous tone, "Miss, the master and the young master's concubines are all clamoring for monthly money." Zhong Qiu quickly stood up with tea and lowered his head. Even though he was Linglong's younger brother and the nominal master of the Pang family, he was still the servant in his heart. Linglong turned around and looked at the housekeeper, and said calmly, "Let them go after paying the monthly allowance. Zhang Qiu and I don't want them anymore." Pang left, but Zhong Qiu didn't notice. Linglong's words kept echoing in his mind. "Me and the Mid-Autumn Festival, me and the Mid-Autumn Festival." After an unknown amount of time, Pang, who had gone to arrange for the concubines to leave, came back. When he walked into Linglong's room, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Zhang Qiu is sitting on Linglong's boudoir bed, Linglong is lying on Zhang Qiu's lap, half squinting her eyes and enjoying the Mid-Autumn Festival, picking her ears. Pang looked at the scene and hesitated to speak, neither leaving nor staying. There is no serious thing in this Pang family. Zhang Qiu didn't think too much, and didn't feel there was anything wrong with her behavior. She just pinched Linglong's earlobe and used a slender, soft brush to pick Linglong's ears. Linglong's face was red with her eyes closed, and her expression was a bit of enjoyment. Women's ears are very sensitive, and the ear-picking brush is very soft. It was really enjoyable. Most old masters don't have this skill. Pang stood there for a long time without waiting for Linglong to answer, and he was almost in a state of panic. How come Gong Li is enjoying this? Filming. Wake up. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 34. Chapter 34. Gong Li is filled with resentment, seeking further reading. The faint scent of sandalwood fills the entire boudoir, and tiny bits of sunlight shine through the hollow carved windows. The calming sandalwood can't make Gong Li feel less socially dead in her heart. As a professional actor, she enjoys it so much that she forgets that she is acting. This is the only situation that has happened to her in the 10 years since she debuted. The last time was when she was just debuting. She did a foot-beating scene. Thinking of her first movie, Gong Li's eyes dimmed slightly. Some things and some people really can't be kept, and they will eventually come to an end. Gong Li had just finished filming Shake, and went to Grandma Bridge. She originally thought that she would usher in a new starting point in life, but before she did, her relationship ended. Gong Li's thoughts were running wild, and no one on the set blamed her for her mistake just now. They just speculated that Gong Li might be blaming herself now. It was just a small accident. No one thought it was a big deal. Zhang Guorong glanced at Gong Li, who was silent, walked up to Chen Lian and joked, "Lian, have you ever learned to pick ears?" Gong Li just enjoyed it. Chen Lian gently turned the handle of the brush with his fingertips, looked at Zhang Guorong and said, "You will know if you try it." "I won't try, you will definitely retaliate against me on purpose. It would be so boring if I don't hear others compliment me on how handsome I am in the future." Zhang Guorong looked like I wouldn't be fooled, and immediately made everyone present laugh. The gloom in Gong Li's heart was also dispelled, and she returned to her gentle and majestic look. She looked at everyone and said, "Sorry, I just got distracted. Let's do it again." "It's okay, let's do it again." Director Chen was also very tolerant. If this were applied to the original heroine Wang Jingying, he would probably go crazy. The camera position was restored, and the veteran actor who played the butler Pang An also exited the camera. Chen Lian sat back on the exquisite boudoir bed and got ready. Gong Li walked to the bed and sat on the soft cushion, then looked at Chen Lian and whispered, "Don't be so nice, it's so comfortable that I'll make a scene." Chen Lian felt an inexplicable smile in his heart, but he still nodded with the Mid-Autumn Festival dullness and cowardice on his face. After seeing Chen Lian agree, Gong Li leaned down and lay on Chen Lian's lap, gently placing her white face on Chen Lian's thigh. The light that passed through the window softly shone on Gong Li's face. Chen Lian looked at her earlobes that became crystal clear under the sunlight. He stretched out his fingers to gently pinch her earlobes and blew lightly on her ears. Loose strands of hair. Gong Li almost couldn't help but shudder. She looked at Chen Lian with squinting eyes and said in a low voice, "Why are you blowing?" "Sister, my hair is blocking it." Chen Lian took on the role of Mid-Autumn Festival and replied softly. Seeing that Chen Lian had already entered the state, Gong Li pursed her lips and said nothing, but she felt strange in her heart. Director Chen had already shouted start. Gong Li quickly put away her strange thoughts, slowly closed her eyes, immersed herself in the role of Ling Long, and enjoyed her brother's gentle caress. Then Zhong Qiu twisted the brush with his right hand and gently swept it on Ling Long's ear. The slight numbness instantly made Ling Long's eyes narrow slightly. Even though she had experienced it once, Ling Long still felt so comfortable. In Zhong Qiu's sight, Ling Long's eyes were squinted, like a lazy and sexy cat whose chin was touched. It had been a long time since she had felt like this. Ling Long was obsessed with it and enjoyed it. Lying on Zhong Qiu's body made her feel very comfortable and relaxed. But soon the housekeeper Pang An came in. Ling Long, who was too comfortable, opened her eyes slightly and felt a little resentful about Pang An's sudden arrival. However, the expression in this look was not good enough. Even if Gong Li put herself into the role, she still did not satisfy Director Cheng. This was the first close contact between Zhong Qiu and Ling Long. That feeling was very important. Director Cheng always felt that the things he photographed were different from what he thought. Just such a scene was filmed more than a dozen times, and every time Chen Lian would pinch Gong Li's earlobe and then gently pick her ears with a brush. Gong Li could swear that this was the most uncomfortable scene she had ever filmed. "Every time I take a shot, I will experience that tingling feeling. The key is that every time it is very short, before I can squint my eyes and enjoy it, I have to stand up and say the lines." This made her feel more and more depressed, and her dissatisfaction and anger were also building up. It wasn't until the 15th filming that Gong Li finally couldn't help her temper. When she took over Pang An's scene, her tone was filled with reprimand and dissatisfaction. At this moment, she was really just like Ling Long, with that contempt for Pang An from the bottom of her heart. Even though her face was gentle and her tone was calm, her words were particularly majestic and unquestionable. Director Chen was finally satisfied with this kind of performance, and felt that Ling Long was right like this. If a servant, even a housekeeper, ruined his and his brother's rest time, how could Ling Long, the master, have no temper? This time it went smoothly. Gong Li vented all her emotions and perfectly demonstrated her ability as a movie queen. However, the frustration in Gong Li's heart was not fully expressed. Chen Lian could see the dissatisfaction in her eyes at a glance. Chen Lian understands it very well. Whoever invented the soft style deserves to be damned. Not unrestrained, not passionate, not artistic at all. After the scene was filmed, other scenes began to be filmed, but Gong Li's condition dropped significantly, always with a hint of resentment. Many scenes had to be shot over and over many times before they could meet director Cheng's requirements. No one felt inappropriate with this kind of efficiency. Everyone was very patient and shot one shot at a time. Director Cheng also liked to hone a shot over and over again like this. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun was not so bright and the pictures in the camera were not so beautiful, Director Cheng announced that it was time to call it a day. After hearing that the work was over, Gong Li breathed a sigh of relief. She knew that her current condition was not good, but Chen Lian, the culprit who caused all this, was in frighteningly good condition. This made Gong Li feel resentful for no reason, but she didn't know whether she blamed Chen Lian or herself. After a day of filming, Gong Li looked a little tired. Not only did she have to act against Chen Lian but also Leslie Chung. She had the most scenes and the least time to rest. After finishing work, Gong Li saw Chen Lian changing out of his costume, but still holding the brush he used during filming. An impulse suddenly surged in my heart, and I wanted to ask Chen Lian to pick my ears again, to perform a complete ear picking, otherwise I would really feel itchy. But as soon as the idea came up, she killed it. He was not really her brother or servant, so there was no way he could be admired after filming. With a touch of regret, Gong Li resisted the impulse and looked away, thinking about whether she should find someone to pick her ears later. There should be an ear-picking shop in the ancient town. There should be CAIER here not far from Yangzhou, but I don't know if it will be as comfortable as Chen Lian's. In the minibus on the way back, Chen Lian sat in front of Gong Li, his slender fingers still spinning the brush, which was as light as a feather dancing on his fingertips. Along the way, Gong Li's eyes never left Chen Lian's fingers spinning the brush. It turns out that men's fingers can be so beautiful. I should say they are sexy. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 35. Chapter 35. Chen Lian is a disaster. Seeking for further reading. The minibus traveled smoothly and slowly through the ancient town. Although the scenery outside the window has been seen many times, it is still beautiful and heartwarming. Some of the people in the car were admiring the beautiful scenery while others were admiring the beauties. In Gong Li's view, Chen Lian is a beauty. If he were the emperor, he would definitely be Daji who would bring disaster to the country and the people. This thought made Gong Li suddenly laugh. Why is it so strange when the identities of men and women are reversed? But Gong Li likes this idea of hers. Ambition and conquest are not just for men. Chen Lian didn't notice that Gong Li behind him kept looking at his hands, and just chatted with Zhang Guorong. I heard from Director Cheng that you have just been admitted to college, so why are your acting skills so good? Leslie Chung leaned lazily on his seat, but his words were very gossipy. Well, just think of me as a genius, just like you are born singing, Chen Lian said narcissistically. Zhang Guorong wanted to retort and stab Chen Lian, but he couldn't help but feel a little happy in his heart. This was the first time Chen Lian praised him. He said I was a genius. Oh, forget it, let him go once and give him a bottle of wine in the evening. This is the benefit of the poisonous tongue character. If you are always vicious, you will be disliked, but if you occasionally praise others, you will be remembered and feel it is pertinent. It's like an enemy who has always been against you suddenly says to you one day, "You are great and I admire you very much." At that time, you will also feel that you are recognized and have a feeling of sympathy. With such a good mood, John Kwarong's eyebrows showed joy, and the gloominess caused by being too involved in acting during the day was dispelled. "Why did you take this prop?" John Kwarong sat up and asked, pointing at the brush in Chen Lian's hand. Chen Lian glanced at him and said, "Hua hua, you don't understand. Draw your head. How can you draw something like this?" John Kwarong immediately understood Chen Lian's hidden meaning. It was something that adults didn't understand, but the way he looked at Chen Lian changed. "What kind of perversion is this? He said the same thing the last time he went to buy rope. Said it was for the art of photography." John Kwarong still remembers Chen Lian's expression at that time. It was a very contradictory excitement. It was not the kind of excitement, but a kind of religious fanaticism, sacred and scary. "Do you want to see a doctor?" John Kwarong felt that he had lost the ability to express himself verbally, and could only rely on the doctor to see Chen Lian's condition. "It's really about painting. I'm a painter." Chen Lian looked at John Kwarong with a strange expression and said. Yes, you said you are a photographer." John Kwarong replied perfunctorily, and then asked seriously, "I know a very powerful doctor, do you want to go and see him?" Chen Lian rolled his eyes at John Kwarong. The man who needed to see a doctor was trying to persuade him to see a doctor. Gong Li, who was sitting behind Chen Lian and John Kwarong, heard their complete conversation and had a strange thought in her heart. There's something a little off about both men. Are there any normal people in this crew? Director Cheng and Duke Fan spent the whole day together like crazy studying how to shoot. I won't mention John Kwarong, as everyone knows it. Chen Lian's mental state now seems not to be very good according to John Kwarong. Gong Li turned her attention to the second female lead in the movie, Sci-fi, who plays John Kwarong's sister in the play. It seems like they are the only two normal people in the entire crew. This crew is really dangerous. But it feels so exciting. Gong Li leaned on her seat, tilted her head and stared at the hairbrush that was jumping and spinning in Chen Lian's hand, and suddenly felt her ears itching. The environment and atmosphere have a really great impact on people. When a normal person enters a world of a group of crazy people, the normal person will definitely go crazy. When the car returned to the hotel, Chen Lian stood up and got out of the car first. He was going to buy paints and painting materials. He planned to give the camera a rest tonight. Gong Li watched Chen Lian get out of the car first, and she didn't know what was going on. She quickly stood up and followed him down. John Kwarong, who had just stood up, looked at Gong Li, who hurried away from him to chase Chen Lian, and sighed quietly. Chen Lian is really a disaster. He's obviously so venomous, but he's also very charming. At the door of the hotel, Chen Lian walked quickly across the stairs with his long legs, climbed up to the third floor and returned to his room. As soon as Gong Li, who was chasing after him, reached the third floor, Chen Lian's figure had already disappeared into the corridor. Gong Li held one hand against the wall and panted slightly, the resentment and loss between her brows almost unable to be resolved. Looking at the deserted corridor, Gong Li let out a long sigh with slightly inspired red lips. At this moment, Sci-fi came from behind, walked up to Gong Li and joked, "What are you doing here? Are you still thinking about what happened during the day?" Hearing Sci-fi's teasing, Gong Li felt a sense of shame in her heart, but the shame disappeared without a trace. Gong Li forced out a smile and looked at Sci-fi and said, "Sister, please stop making fun of me." Sci-fi was someone who had been there before, and could see the unnaturalness in Gong Li's expression, and immediately stopped teasing her. Sci-fi smiled and said, "Okay, no more joking. I'm going back to the room first. You should rest early." After saying that, Sci-fi also disappeared into the corridor with light steps. Gong Li looked towards the end of the corridor, and after a few seconds turned around and walked towards her room. At the corner of the stairs, Mr. Zhou watched Gong Li disappear behind the door, then walked out and went straight to Chen Lian's room. Chen Lian's door was open. As soon as Mr. Zhou walked in, he bumped into Chen Lian. Chen Lian, whose hair was still dripping with water, wiped his hair with a towel, looked at young Master Zhou and asked, "Have you rested? Where were you just now?" "Well, I'm hungry. Let's go buy something to eat." Mr. Zhou smiled and looked at Chen Lian, without mentioning the scene he just saw. Chen Lian nodded when he heard this, wiped his hair and walked into the room. He found his backpack and took out a few banknotes from it. "You want to buy something?" Mr. Zhou leaned against the wall and looked at Chen Lian's tall and straight figure, his eyes full of fascination. Chen Lian hummed and said, "I haven't painted for a long time. I'm going to buy paints and painting materials." "I'll go with you," Mr. Zhou said quickly, not wanting Chen Lian to disappear from his sight again. Today, just one day after not going to the set, Gong Li became the same as she did then. She was afraid that if she didn't look at Chen Lian, he would no longer belong to her. Ever since he said he had given up that day, Mr. Zhou felt like he had been poisoned and fell hopelessly in love with Chen Lian. Chen Lian raised his head and looked at Mr. Zhou with a smile and said, "No, I'll be back soon. I saw someone selling painting materials yesterday." "No, I want to go with you," Mr. Zhou said stubbornly. Chen Lian was a little surprised by Mr. Zhou's nervousness, but he didn't care. He threw the towel on his hair on the bed and said, "Okay, let's go." After coming out of the hotel and walking on the streets of the ancient town, Mr. Zhou was in a much better mood. He jumped up and down holding Chen Lian's hand and smiled happily. Only at this time did Mr. Zhou feel that Chen Lian belonged completely to him, and they were the only two in the world. Chen Lian's mood was also affected by Mr. Zhou. He took her hand and gently turned it around. The two of them seemed to be dancing a waltz on the street at dusk. The shadows behind the two people sometimes overlap and sometimes separate, stretched very long under the sunset. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 36. Chapter 36. This is really exciting, please follow up. The red candle was dotted with a wisp of flame, swaying in the breeze, causing the shadows of everything in the room to float. There was a power outage in the hotel, and there was no way to sleep in such hot weather without a fan. The moonlight outside the window looked hazy and cool, like cold glutinous rice cakes. Chen Lian came out of the bathroom, soaked all over. This was his third shower. On the big bed in the room, Mr. Zhou had fallen asleep in a daze, with only a thin blanket covering his body, and his snow-white skin was all exposed to the air. The bright sunshine with scorching heat woke up Chen Lian the next morning. Chen Lian pinched his fingers subconsciously before he woke up. Looking at Mr. Zhou, who was still awake, Chen Lian got up, washed his face, got up and went out. "I have been neglecting my practice recently, so I still need to pick up the kung fu." In the small square downstairs of the hotel, Chen Lian was wearing loose short-sleeved shorts and playing the most traditional old eight palms with the help of Dao-Na. Baguazhang is a boxing technique that focuses on changing palm techniques and walking and turning, so it is very entertaining to watch, especially for a figure like Chen Lian. It is even more pleasing to the eye. Gong Li didn't sleep well last night and got up early. He leaned against the window and took a sip of the freshly brewed coffee. He casually glanced down and noticed Chen Lian, who was practicing boxing downstairs. After putting the coffee on his lips, he stopped immediately, and his attention was attracted by Chen Lian downstairs. The early morning sun shines on Chen Lian's sweaty arms, which seem to glow. The smooth and well-proportioned muscle lines are full of the beauty of strength. Gong Li held the coffee cup and watched Chen Lian punch 3 times. She didn't look back until Chen Lian disappeared downstairs. Looking at the cold coffee in her hand, Gong Li drank it all in one gulp, but felt that this sip of coffee was like strong liquor, making people drunk. Chen Lian on the other side had just returned to the room. Before he could walk in, Jo Sun rushed over and hugged him. Seeing Mr. Zhou rushing towards him, Chen Lian quickly closed the door, then frowned and said, "Be careful, this is not your own home. You disappeared when I came here." Jo Sun pouted and said coquettishly, not taking what Chen Lian just said to his heart at all. Chen Lian knew that Mr. Zhou was used to having a free temper, so he didn't try to restrain her. He patted her smooth back and said, "I'm going to exercise." "Okay, come down quickly. I'm covered in sweat." "I like it." Mr. Zhou stretched out his pink tongue and licked it. At this moment, Chen Lian felt that Mr. Zhou's nickname of human elf was fake. This was not a human elf, but a succubus from another world. As a warrior in the world, Chen Lian can only choose to sacrifice himself to suppress and seal the succubus. After spending a lot of time, when Chen Lian and Mr. Zhou arrived on the minibus downstairs, everyone was already there. Chen Lian didn't feel the slightest bit embarrassed. It wasn't the allotted time anyway, but Mr. Zhou was a little shy and felt that everyone was looking at her and Chen Lian with amusement. In fact, who cares what you do? These days, you are almost too busy to keep yourself busy, so who would care about others? Chen Lian took the initiative to sit next to Zhang Guorong and couldn't help but yawn. "Young people should exercise restraint," Zhang Guorong said with some seriousness. Chen Lian hummed in confusion, turned to look at Zhang Guorong and asked in surprise, "Are you going to die?" "Roll." "Oh, call me when you get there." Chen Lian closed his eyes in confusion, and for once he was so obedient that he didn't talk back. Zhang Guorong opened his mouth and suppressed the words he didn't curse. Let him go for once. Just one time. There were not many scenes today, and Chen Lian's scenes were even less. After arriving at the set, I spent most of the time watching Gong Li and Leslie Chung acting. The two are infatuated men and resentful women in the movie. If you add the Mid-Autumn Festival, they are 3 infatuated men and resentful women. If you add He Sci-fi, who plays Zhang Guorong's sister, they are 4 infatuated men and resentful women. Plus the most beautiful Yang Guifei Zhouji, who plays Zhang Guorong's lover, they are 5 infatuated men and resentful women. Therefore, this movie is essentially a love story and has little to do with feminist consciousness. Director Cheng imagined that this is a feminist movie, but in fact it is a romance movie that distorts human nature and is completely terrible. Chen Lian leaned against the wall and looked at Leslie Chung kissing Gong Li's earlobe in front of the camera, and was curious about what he was thinking when he was acting in such a scene. Do you find it strange, or do you just regard it as work? Gong Li's performance today was pretty good. Her shyness and instant infatuation when her earlobe was kissed was particularly well expressed. Chen Lian watched with admiration. The shyness of a girl is the most difficult thing to play. It is something that is completely lost when you get older, but Gong Li is really strong at being able to perform it. After the filming of this scene, Gong Li touched her earlobe. The feeling of being kissed on her earlobe just now was not as strong as the feeling of being kissed by Chen Lian yesterday. This made Gong Li look at Chen Lian on the sidelines. Noticing Gong Li's gaze, Chen Lian smiled slightly. Just as he was about to say something, Director Cheng called him over. "Gong Li, come here too." Director Cheng waved Gong Li over. Chen Lian thought Director Cheng was going to change the script again, so he walked over and asked, "Director, do you want to change the script?" Director Cheng shook his head and said, "No, it's a scene for the evening. I'll communicate with you in advance." "Director, what did you call me for?" Gong Li came over and asked. Director Cheng looked at Gong Li and Chen Lian and said, "We have to shoot a scene between Ling Long and Zhang Kaiyu tonight. Do you two have any problems?" "Together?" Chen Lian frowned, and then realized that director Chen was talking about the scene where Linglong seduces Zhang Kaiyu into bed. The director's words were very conservative. I wonder if he was worried that Gong Li was of the opposite sex, so he didn't say it so straightforwardly. Gong Li also realized which scene director Chen was talking about, and her heart trembled slightly. Linglong seduces Mid-Autumn Festival? This is really exciting. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 37. Chapter 37. Confused and obsessed, seeking for further reading. Are you filming a night scene tonight? During the lunch break, Mr. Zhou leaned lazily on Chen Lian's shoulder. His whole body lacked energy. Chen Lian plucked the boiled bean sprouts in the lunchbox and said without interest. Mr. Zhou squinted his eyes and raised his face, like a sunflower, as if he wanted to draw energy from the sun. What drama? Linglong wants to become a woman and asks Zhang Kaiyu for help. Chen Lian's calm voice suddenly rang in Mr. Zhou's ears. Mr. Zhou's originally lazy demeanor disappeared instantly, and a solemn look appeared on his delicate little face. She had a bad feeling that something would go wrong between Gong Li and Chen Lian tonight. Stop eating, come with me. Mr. Zhou snatched the chopsticks and lunchbox from Chen Lian's hand and threw them into the garbage bag next to him. She has never been one to sit still and wait for death. She can't stop filming, but she can stop other things. She wanted Xiao Lian to be listless all day long. Mr. Zhou took Chen Lian and walked to a deserted place. There were many hidden places in the Pang family compound. Ever since being teased by Chen Lian yesterday, Gong Li had been thinking about finding an opportunity to return it. After dinner, I was about to go to Chen Lian on the pretext of a drama, when I saw him being pulled away by Mr. Zhou. Gong Li watched them disappear around the corner of the corridor, and followed them as soon as her thoughts moved. Gong Li vaguely guessed what Mr. Zhou and Chen Lian were going to do, but deliberately didn't think about it. I just hinted to myself in my heart that I was just wandering around out of boredom, and had no other meaning. Mr. Zhou found a remote room, looked around, then opened the door and pulled Chen Lian in. What are you going to do? Chen Lian looked at Mr. Zhou, wondering if she was a little too crazy. Mr. Zhou pushed Chen Lian behind the door, pressed against his chest and said, "You know what I want to do, and you also know why I want to do this." Chen Lian said, somewhat dumbfounded, "Are you too nervous? Have you underestimated your own charm?" Mr. Zhou's slender fingers slid across Chen Lian's chin and whispered. "I'm not Chen Lian felt helpless and was about to explain, but his mouth was blocked by Mr. Zhou. Feng Shui is changing, and in 30 years the person who lives east of the river is Mr. Zhou. Gong Li, who had been following quietly, listened to the sounds coming from inside through the carved wooden door. After eavesdropping outside the door for a while, Gong Li couldn't help but glance inside through the gap beside the door, and her bright eyes were instantly covered with mist. Gong Li was a little panicked for a moment and made a slight noise. Chen Lian in the room stopped immediately and turned his head to take a look. "It's a pity that I only saw a flash of white through the crack of the door." Chen Lian looked away, guessing who was outside the door just now. There are several people in the crew wearing white clothes, but not many people wearing white skirts. There was only Gong Li, and her costume today was a white coat and skirt. Chen Lian watched Gong Li several times on the set in the afternoon, but her reactions were all normal and there were no flaws. When Chen Lian looked away, Gong Li couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It would have been really embarrassing if he had been discovered. But when she thought about the scene that night, Gong Li's fair face couldn't help but turn red. Originally, there was nothing much to look forward to in this scene, but now it was different. The scene at noon would always appear in her mind. When the crescent moon hung high in the sky and candlelight lit up in the Pang family courtyard, Gong Li couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Linglong's emotions in this scene were not difficult to act, but Gong Li always felt that there was something wrong with her mentality. Linglong likes Zhongren and finds a photo of a woman in his house. The woman in the photo was mature and charming. Linglong was envious of that talented woman and believed that the reason Zongren didn't like her was because she was not a real woman. So she wanted to become a real woman, so she found Zongkaiu. This kind of scene would be scolded 20 years later, but in this era it has a literary flavor. Because it embodies the complexity of human nature and the expanding desires in the heart. The dim light illuminated everything in the room dimly. Linglong looked at the photo she brought back from Zongren's house and looked at the mature and charming woman on it. I'm not as good looking as her. Linglong couldn't hide her inferiority caused by love. Zongkaiu took the photo from Linglong, looked at her and said, she is not as good looking as her sister, who is a girl. But the master said, girls are not as good looking as women. Linglong murmured as she looked at herself in the mirror. That's what their men said. Linglong turned her head and looked at Zongkaiu and asked softly, aren't you a man? I would rather not be a man. Zongkaiu's love is humble and she just wants to be by Linglong's side forever. Linglong didn't hear the humble love in the Mid-Autumn Festival words. She looked at her young face in the mirror and said in a devilish voice, what you said is wrong. Women are just prettier than girls. My uncle actually likes my sister in my heart. Zhong Qiu endured the pain in his heart, his voice slightly choked with sobs. Yeah. Linglong turned her head and looked at Mid-Autumn Festival, and a thought suddenly came to her mind that she didn't want to be a girl anymore. Linglong stood up and walked behind Zongkaiu, putting her hands on his shoulders. Under the dim light, the atmosphere suddenly became charming. I don't want to be a girl anymore. Linglong's hands caressed Zongkaiu's neck, her fingertips slid across his face, and her fingers slid over his ears. Zongkaiu was fascinated by this sudden tenderness and caress, which he had never expected in his dreams. When he raised his head in confusion and saw the exquisite face, he suddenly woke up. This is his sister, the master of the Pang family, not a woman he can dream of. Zongkaiu pulled Linglong's hand away in panic and ran out of Linglong's boudoir without looking back. Linglong looked at Zongkaiu's panicked figure with a sense of loss. After running out of the camera, Chen Lian touched his itchy earlobe and suspected that Gong Li did it on purpose. Gong Li in the room looked at her fingers and suddenly smiled. This time, Chen Lian could feel what she was feeling at that time, but she couldn't tell whether she did it on purpose or if she couldn't help it. The filming of the scene was not that smooth. It went back and forth several times. Every time, Gong Li would touch Chen Lian's ear, and then watch him run away in confusion. Perhaps it was the shyness and fear of the Mid-Autumn Festival that made Gong Li regain a psychological advantage over Chen Lian in her heart. When the scene was being filmed, Gong Li really felt like she was Linglong seducing her younger brother Zongkaiu. With such a psychological advantage, in the second scene, Gong Li threw away all her psychological burden. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, I was wearing cool shorts and was bare-chested, lying on the bed and listening to the sound of running water outside the house. The beauty in Linglong's room just now always came to my mind, and I missed the feeling of Linglong's soft catkins touching me. Just when he was in a daze during the Mid-Autumn Festival, Linglong suddenly appeared beside his bed with her hair down and a thin white nightgown, holding a red lantern in her hand. Zongkaiu was startled, and the evil thoughts that had just occurred in her heart instantly turned into panic when she saw Linglong, and she sat up from the bed suddenly. Linglong looked at the flustered Zongkaiu with an expression as if possessed and said calmly, "Let me see if your quilt is covered." Under the red light of the red lantern, Zhong Qiu's side face was clearly illuminated, but the other side of her face was hidden in the darkness, but the light in her eyes could not be concealed. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 38. Chapter 38. The pot falls from the sky. The night breeze gently blew the white gauze beside the window, and the sound of gurgling water was the only sound in the whole house. Chen Lian and Gong Li were stopped by director Cheng just now because they were too involved. Everyone present looked strange, but no one said anything. But Gong Li lowered her head and held onto the nightgown she had just nearly torn off with her hands, not daring to raise her head to look at anyone. The knuckles of her fingers holding onto the clothes were slightly white from the exertion. Even if you are no longer a young girl, you will still feel ashamed after this situation occurs. The most important thing is that there are many acquaintances present, all old friends who have worked together several times. For such a level of social depth, Gong Li has a strong psychological quality without digging into the cracks on the spot. Chen Lian was very calm. He stretched out his hand to lift his clothes, and then raised his hand to wipe off the lipstick marks on his face. Glancing at Gong Li, who was blushing and afraid to raise her head to see anyone, Chen Lian didn't feel ashamed at all because he was too involved in acting. As a professional actor, isn't it normal for you to be a little invested? Chen Lian coughed, attracting the attention of everyone on the crew to him, and then said to Director Chang, "Director, your performance was not good just now. There is something wrong with your condition today. Can you shoot again tomorrow?" Several people present looked at Director Chang with strange expressions, waiting for his answer. "Since the condition is not good, we will shoot again tomorrow and call it a day," Director Chang said immediately, and then walked out first. Several other people followed the situation and went out, taking good care of Gong Li's current mood. Only Mr. Zhou stood there with an angry face, as if he was worried that if he left, the two people over there would make excuses to cause more drama. Chen Lian glanced at Mr. Zhou and then turned to Gong Li and said, "Sister, they have all left. Don't be embarrassed. It's normal for accidents during filming." "Accident? Is this an accident?" Gong Li was too embarrassed to meet people. It was obvious that the two of them were so involved that they had completely forgotten about the professionalism of actors. Chen Lian actually wanted to say to Gong Li, "If you hadn't been teasing me before, I wouldn't be like this. I am a very professional actor." Mr. Zhou came over now, took Chen Lian's hand, and said in a low voice, "Let's go." Chen Lian looked at young Master Zhou, who was holding back his resentment, shook her little hand, and then followed her away. When only Gong Li was left in the room, she raised her head and let out a long sigh, then covered her face in shame, feeling that she really couldn't see anyone. "Why were you so involved at that time? Why did you have to take it off? Why did you just grab it?" Thinking of this, Gong Li's face turned visibly red again. After sitting on the edge of the bed for a long time, she calmed down, packed up her clothes and went out. The crew's minibus had already left at the entrance of Pang's courtyard, and only He Sci-fi was leaning against a car, waiting for Gong Li. After seeing Gong Li come out, He Sci-fi opened her mouth and didn't know what to say. She just opened the car door and pretended that nothing happened and said, "Get in the car and go back." Gong Li looked at He Sci-fi and said hesitantly, "Sister Fei, what happened tonight?" "Needless to say, I understand." He Sci-fi smiled, and then said jokingly, "If it were me, I'd probably be worse than you." Gong Li's expression froze and her face turned red again. Although she knew He Sci-fi was joking on purpose, she still couldn't help but feel embarrassed. He Sci-fi walked over and took Gong Li's arm and said, "Don't think so much. Go back and have a good sleep. You will forget everything tomorrow." Alas, Gong Li sighed faintly. If she were a girl of 18 or 19, tonight's events would not embarrass her and others would not say anything. But she is already in her 20s and is still a professional actor. Thinking of her age, Gong Li suddenly felt very tired. She was already in her 20s and had been divorced. Where would she rely on in the future? Actresses always seem to be anxious about their age and appearance. What's there to worry about when you're in your prime in your 20s? Sitting in the car and looking at the dark streets, Gong Li's thoughts wandered to nowhere. Chen Lian probably didn't expect that he would be the cause of Gong Li's age anxiety, but when he finally found out, he just smiled speechlessly. Everyone has anxiety, so what does it have to do with you? No need to blame yourself at all. In the hotel room late at night, Chen Lian squinted at the oil painting that had just been painted with large color blocks on the drawing board. He felt that this would be the best painting he had ever painted. Well, actually I have only been painting for a few months, but Chen Lian has made rapid progress, almost comparable to the passion he has been painting for many years. This kind of progress surprised Chen Lian. He seemed to be really talented, even in photography. Opposite Chen Lian, Mr. Zhou leaned against the window and looked at the moon hanging high in the starry sky. He was only covered with a piece of white gauze, revealing his young and beautiful figure. Under the faint moonlight, mixed with the flickering firelight of candles, it gives people a hazy and holy feeling. Am I more beautiful or is Gong Li more beautiful? Mr. Zhou turned his head and looked at Chen Lian and asked. Chen Lian paused with the brush in his hand, and then said, "You look good." "You stopped." Mr. Zhou turned his head and said angrily. Chen Lian put down his pen, pulled the blanket from the bed, walked over to Mr. Zhou, covered her and said, "Are you angry about what happened at night?" "No," Mr. Zhou said stubbornly, then suddenly turned his head to look at Chen Lian and punched his chest hard. Chen Lian held Mr. Zhou's wrist and said softly, "That was just an accident, just an act." Mr. Zhou took advantage of the opportunity to approach Chen Lian's arms and murmured, "It's best like this." On the other side of the hotel, Gong Li sat on the bed and said to the other end of the phone, "There is no need to hide the divorce. I don't want to wait until the movie is released to announce it, and I can't wait any longer." There was a long silence on the other side of the phone. After a long time, he replied, "Okay, I hope you will be well in the future." Hearing this answer, Gong Li's eyes turned red. Although she had been divorced for a while, she still felt a little sad. After all, she was not a cold-blooded animal. The news came out the next day. It was said that Gong Li's previous producer accidentally let it slip when they were promoting the new movie. But after everyone knew the news, their eyes changed when they looked at Chen Lian, who was acting opposite Gong Li. It was mainly because they thought that they were too involved in the acting yesterday. It was difficult not to guess whether there was something going on between the two of them now. After Mr. Zhou learned the news, he felt very bad. He kept saying to himself, "Why are we getting divorced? Why are we getting divorced?" Chen Lian was also speechless. He had unknowingly taken the blame. Will there be another gossip in the entertainment industry in the future, where famous artists Chen Lian and Gong Li fake their relationship because of their drama? Gan. Even though Chen Lian has a good temper, he can't help but want to scold his mother. It's not good to announce the breakup when, but it has to be announced at this juncture. "What did you do early?" Just when Chen Lian was about to talk to Gong Li took the initiative to speak first. "Do you have time later? I want to review the scene tonight." Gong Li looked at Chen Lian calmly, no longer shy as before, as if she was talking about a normal thing. Chen Lian was feeling depressed and didn't want to talk to Gong Li at all. At this moment, he finally understood how he felt after Zhongkai went to bed with Linglong and watched Linglong and Zhongren get together. Frustrated. "Are you angry?" Gong Li asked directly. Chen Lian took a deep breath, looked at Gong Li calmly and said, "I'm just a young actor. I don't dare. I can't control what others say." Now Chen Lian looks very much like the Mid-Autumn Festival. Gong Li walked up to Chen Lian and grabbed his hand and said, "You really don't dare. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 39. Chapter 39. It's better to be a sister, please follow up. The temperature in Jiangnan in early autumn is still a bit hot, especially on cloudy days, and the air pressure is so low that it makes people feel chest tight. Mr. Zhou felt that her chest was about to burst with anger. She had just gone to see Zhang Guorong and he Sci-fi acting, but when she turned around, Chen Lian disappeared. Also missing is Gong Li. Just when Mr. Zhou was about to go find someone, he saw Chen Lian wearing a blue gown and swaying out of the corner of the corridor. Different from the cautious servant in the Mid-Autumn Festival, Chen Lian's current image and temperament are more like a personable young master. Mr. Zhou couldn't care less about admiring Chen Lian's current beauty. He quickly ran over and grabbed his arm and asked, "Where have you been?" "It's convenient," Chen Lian said lazily. Mr. Zhou leaned towards Chen Lian's chest and sniffed his nose. He didn't smell any fragrance. He said dubiously, "I thought you and Gong Li were together." Chen Lian pressed Mr. Zhou's head and rubbed it and said, "Why do you want to do that all day long? Over time, you will easily become mentally ill." Who knew she had broken up a long time ago, yet she was still so involved yesterday. Mr. Zhou let Chen Lian touch his head and muttered. Chen Lian said helplessly, "It's just a coincidence. Even if she is single, I won't take the initiative." Yes, you are passive." Mr. Zhou wrinkled his small nose and was somewhat dissatisfied with Chen Lian's answer. Just because he didn't take the initiative doesn't mean he wouldn't refuse. But where is Gong Li now? Mr. Zhou glanced around, but still didn't see Gong Li. In the Mid-Autumn Festival room, Gong Li sat on the bed, pulled her hair, chuckled, and then got up and left. At night, the scene that was not finished yesterday was resumed. This time, Director Cheng did not leave so many people behind, so all the irrelevant and unemployed people returned to the hotel early, leaving only 2 assistants and Duke Fan on the set. At this moment, Director Cheng and Duke Fan were gathering together, head to head, discussing in a low voice how to shoot later. It was the same bed on the Mid-Autumn Festival. Chen Lian leaned on the bed a little sleepily. He slept too late last night. Gong Li looked at Chen Lian's half-dead look and felt a little angry for no reason. It seemed that Chen Lian's current malaise was a sign of disrespect for her. The scene to be filmed later is a passionate scene. There is no passion in Chen Lian's current appearance. Chen Lian seemed to sense Gong Li's displeasure, opened his eyes and said, "I didn't sleep well last night, and again at noon." "I know," Gong Li interrupted quickly, not knowing what she was thinking of, and didn't let Chen Lian finish. Chen Lian didn't care and yawned, looked at Gong Li and said, "Can we try to get over it once?" "I'll try my best," Gong Li replied calmly, then smiled and said softly, "If you want to come a few more times, that's no problem." Chen Lian looked at Gong Li's raised lips and said angrily, "You think so?" "I admit that I think, unlike you, I dare to think but not do it," Gong Li admitted freely and directly, and also mocked Chen Lian. Chen Lian was not touched by this low-level provocation. He faced Gong Li's somewhat provocative eyes and said, "Sister, wake up. Filming is filming. I'm talking about filming, what do you think it is?" Gong Li leaned in front of Chen Lian and whispered, with a narrow look in her beautiful eyes. "Chen Lian." After teasing Chen Lian, Gong Li's mood improved a lot. She sat up straight and turned to look at Director Cheng and said, "Director, we are ready." Director Cheng immediately said, "Okay, let's get started." Duke Fan also stood up, picked up the camera, and got ready. Chen Lian quickly adjusted his emotions and put himself into the Mid-Autumn Festival state. This time, his thinking was very clear and he was not as overly involved as the last time. The same is true for Gong Li. After experiencing yesterday's social death and the impact of the breakup, she became even stronger. Only those who have experienced humble love know that true love and attention cannot be exchanged for that. In the dim red light, the breeze blew through the curtains, and the sound of gurgling water outside the window made the atmosphere in the house charming. This time the shooting went very smoothly, it was really done in one go, and Director Cheng did not polish it repeatedly like before. After the filming was completed, on the way back to the hotel, Gong Li took the initiative to sit next to Chen Lian. "I can't tell, but you are still a good man. You and Mr. Zhou have not been in love for a long time, right?" "I'm not a good man, and Mr. Zhou and I are not in love," Chen Lian said calmly as the embarrassment in his heart quickly subsided. Gong Li's expression changed slightly. Not in love? Does that mean it doesn't matter? No wonder I say I'm not a good man, but this way I won't have any psychological pressure. Where did you take that ear-picking thing last time? Gong Li suddenly asked about the ear-picking thing that made her feel itchy before. Chen Lian couldn't help but beat his fingers, and then said, "It's in the hotel." "Bring it to me tonight," Gong Li said directly. "Why do you want that thing?" Chen Lian turned his head and looked at Gong Li and asked. Gong Li smiled softly and said, "Then don't worry about it, just give it to me." After returning to the hotel and going upstairs, Gong Li reminded Chen Lian again. "Go and bring me the things. I'll wait for you in the room." Chen Lian grunted listlessly. It was almost 11 o'clock now and he was very sleepy. Pushing open the door, Chen Lian didn't hear Mr. Zhou's voice. When he walked in, he saw that she was already asleep. Her sleeping position was not pretty, but she was very sexy. Chen Lian slowed down, not wanting to wake Mr. Zhou, walked to the bedside, picked up the ear-picking brush, and went out quietly. In the quiet corridor, Chen Lian walked towards Gong Li's room, the brush in his hand spinning habitually on his fingertips. Dong dong. Chen Lian knocked on the door. After a while, the door lock clicked, but the door was not opened. "You come in." Gong Li's voice came from the room, and Chen Lian pushed the door open without thinking. Gong Li's room is large and well decorated, much better than Chen Lian's single room. At least it has air conditioning. The light in the room was very dark, only the wall lamp beside the bed was on. Gong Li was leaning on the bedside wearing a thin white silk pajamas. Chen Lian glanced at Gong Li's slightly open collar, then raised the brush in his hand and said, "Where do you put it?" Gong Li looked at the brush held on Chen Lian's fingers, and recalled the tingling feeling, and her eyes suddenly became lazy and blurred. "Come here and help my sister pick her ears like last time." At this moment, Gong Li seemed to have changed back to Ling Long, the eldest lady who was aloof but extremely close to Mid-Autumn Festival. Chen Lian looked at Gong Li, who picked up the pillow and lay on the bed quietly waiting for him to pass. He was confused and couldn't tell whether he was Chen Lian or Zhong Qiu. Chen Lian walked up to Gong Li and sat on the bed, gently lifting Gong Li's face and placing it on his lap. Gong Li squinted her eyes, moved her nose slightly, turned her face towards Chen Lian and rubbed it in. Her cheek was pressed tightly against Chen Lian's abdomen, which was very useful for such intimacy. Chen Lian looked at Gong Li's confused and lazy expression, and the excitement and heat in his heart suddenly ignited. Sleepy? Trapped? Gong Li raised her head and met Chen Lian's gaze. There was no need to say anything at this moment, just act. Chen Lian, who squinted his eyes, felt in his heart that it was better to be his sister, who was much gentler than Mr. Zhou, who only knew how to act coquettishly. Mr. Zhou, who was not as good as his sister, opened his eyes in a daze and saw that no one was in the room. He thought that Chen Lian had not come back from the set, so he closed his eyes and fell asleep again. A lot of content was deleted because it was illegal and blocked several times. This may happen again in the future. Please understand. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 40. Chapter 40. How can you not be punished if you do something wrong? In the hotel room late at night, the fan was whirring slowly, and the breeze swirled around the room, which made it stuffy. On the bed covered with a mat, Mr. Zhou fell asleep in a daze, with marks on his face. For a woman who was on guard against fire and theft, Mr. Zhou's reaction was indeed a bit slow. It was already past 1 o'clock in the middle of the night. Mr. Zhou stood up to drink water like a sleepwalker. He did not think at all that there should be a man lying next to him. Young Master Zhou held the cup with her little hand and took a big sip. Because she drank too quickly, the water flowed down her chin and down her slender neck. Call. After taking a sip of water, Mr. Zhou raised his arm and wiped his mouth. Then he turned his head and looked to the side. After finding that there was still no one, he was about to lie down and continue sleeping. The moment young Master Joe lay down, her round eyes suddenly opened, and she suddenly regained consciousness. "What time is it? Why haven't you come back yet?" Young Master Joe finally remembered that Chen Lian should have been back long ago. She turned over and glanced at the alarm clock on the bedside table. She found that the hour hand was pointing to 1, and she finally panicked. Mr. Joe quickly got up, pushed open the screen window and looked out. In the small square below Bingo, the cruise minibus had already returned. When the car is back, people should be back too, but where is there anyone in the room now? Mr. Joe quickly realized that Chen Lian should be with Gong Li now. The moment he thought of this, anger rose on Xiao Qiao's face. "Damn dog man, he says every day that he doesn't take the initiative, why would he go to someone else's bed if he doesn't take the initiative?" Mr. Joe was so angry that he quickly put on a Chen Lian t-shirt and went out angrily. When he came to the door of Gong Li's room, Mr. Joe heard Gong Li's ruiao voice coming from inside. "Chen Lian taught Gong Li to sing? Pooh! How can anyone sing like this?" Mr. Joe reacted quickly, his face suddenly filled with anger. "I was so angry that I just wanted to raise my hand and smash the door, but hesitated. It's natural to make a fuss to relieve anger, but what excuse do you use to make a fuss? After the fuss is over, can you still stay in this crew, and can you continue to be with Chen Lian?" A trace of helpless sadness flashed through Mr. Joe's heart, but he couldn't let it go like this, so he raised his hand and started knocking on the door. As long as the sound inside stopped, Mr. Joe would knock at the right pace, so that the knocking on the door would not be drowned out by Gong Li's shout. Listening to Gong Li's sometimes melodious and sometimes high-pitched singing voice, Mr. Joe outside the door couldn't help but cursed in a low voice, "You are the only one who can sing, amazing." Mr. Joe's knock on the door quickly attracted the attention of the two people in the room. However, Chen Lian had no intention of stopping and continued to sing along with Gong Li. Gong Li also heard the knock on the door, but she was in a state of excitement. She didn't care so much. She just wanted to finish singing the song High Mountains and Flowing Waters. Mr. Joe knocked for a while and found that the two people inside had no intention of stopping, and Gong Li's voice was getting louder and louder. What a deception! Mr. Joe simply stopped controlling his intensity and started knocking on the door vigorously. Bang bang bang. The fierce knocking on the door echoed in the quiet corridor, and the room became silent for an instant. After a pause, Gong Li's breathless voice came from the room, "Who is it? I'm already asleep. I'll talk about it tomorrow if I have anything to do." "Sleep with you? Mr. Joe is not a fool. How could he not hear it?" So he knocked on the door again and shouted, "It's me, Mr. Joe. Open the door." Just when Mr. Joe couldn't help but want to kick the door was opened, and Chen Lian came out. Seeing Mr. Joe who wanted to open her mouth to curse, he quickly covered her mouth. "Ugh, you bastard!" Mr. Joe looked at Chen Lian angrily, then opened his mouth and bit Chen Lian's mouth. Chen Lian endured the pain, picked up Mr. Joe and walked to his room. Being pinned against Chen Lian, his little hands couldn't help but hit him, but he didn't yell anymore. After returning to his room, Chen Lian put Zhou Suneng down and then raised his hand to look at his own palm. The tiger's mouth was bitten with a deep tooth mark, and blood oozed out. Mr. Joe stared at Chen Lian with red eyes. He looked pitiful outside of class, and Chen Lian couldn't say anything to blame. "Didn't you say you wouldn't get along with her?" Mr. Joe's thin body looked particularly powerful, and Chen Lian felt guilty for a moment. Seeing Chen Lian not speaking, Mr. Joe kicked him angrily. "You are a liar." Seeing Mr. Joe continuing to go crazy, Chen Lian picked her up and blocked her mouth. The best way to shut up a woman is not to reason with her, but to just kiss her. Under Chen Lian's fierce offensive, Mr. Joe quickly softened, and the momentum he had just been like a little lion also disappeared. After a long time, Chen Lian let go of young Master Zhou, licked his bitten lip, and then said, "Have you calmed down?" Mr. Zhou turned his face away from Chen Lian's bloody mouth, fearing that he would become soft-hearted if he couldn't help it. Chen Lian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and had a new understanding of Mr. Zhou's wildness. How could Mr. Zhou, who was free-spirited, be such a temperless person? However, her anger dissipated quickly. She was a very open-minded person, and now she didn't have much anger left in her heart. The 20-year-old Mr. Zhou does not have such a rich love history, but his attitude towards love can already show some signs of his future. Chen Lian sat under the electric fan to cool down for a while before saying, "I'm not a good person, you know." Mr. Zhou suddenly turned around and looked at Chen Lian and shouted, "Then you can't get along with other women while I'm still here." Chen Lian coughed and said, "Do you believe me when I say I'm teaching her to sing?" "I believe I am a fool," Mr. Zhou said with a snort. Chen Lian looked into Mr. Zhou's eyes and asked, "Do you believe it or not?" Mr. Zhou, Believe it or not, Mr. Zhou felt that he was a fool. How could he believe Chen Lian's words that he didn't take the initiative? Mr. Zhou looked at Chen Lian's sleepy features, and anger rose in his heart. He was so energetic with others, but felt sleepy with him. As soon as Mr. Zhou took off the t-shirt he was wearing, he wanted to pounce on Chen Lian, but the gap between the two was too big. Mr. Zhou's actions were more like throwing food into his arms. Chen Lian looked at the little lion baring its teeth and immediately transformed into an animal trainer and took out the red rope that had not been used for several days. The winding, binding and knotting were done in one go. Looking at the little lion that couldn't move, Chen Lian went over and pinched her little mouth and said, "Will you bite again in the future?" Mr. Zhou didn't answer. His whole body was as soft as if it had been sealed, and the spring between his brows and eyes turned into water vapor and filled his beautiful eyes. Chen Lian hugged Mr. Zhou and whispered in her ear, "Bite people will be punished, are you ready?" Mr. Zhou raised his head, closed his eyes and hummed softly. Chen Lian smiled softly, hugged young Master Zhou and lay on the bed. After finding a comfortable position, he said, "But I did something wrong tonight, so I won't punish you. Let's go to sleep." Mr. Zhou suddenly opened his eyes, opened his mouth, aimed at Chen Lian's shoulder and bit down. "How can you not be punished if you do something wrong?"